A lot of people will say that they feel that their shoulder feels better, or they have other issues, like every time they walk more than 20 minutes, they're having significant back pain. These things have been shown to really, really help.
Today, we have a very interesting topic. I think that this is, something that we're trying to get in front of, because this is what we're going to see in the skincare industry that in the near future. We hear about things from the snail mucin to salmon sperm, all these things that are the latest and greatest, quote unquote, and ultimately they're trying to cause some type of inflammatory reaction that will help stimulate collagen, right? But today we're talking about the future of regenerative skincare. And there are going to be multiple different products that you're going to talk about, so what we'll do is this. We'll kind of define what regenerative skincare is, talk about what we think is going to be the clear winner in the future, and then cite some data, show you why we feel that way. I just don't want to give you our opinions, right? So this is the future of regenerative skincare, Muse stem cells and exosomes. Muse means multi-lineage differentiating stress-enduring stem cells and their exosomes. And we think that there's some groundbreaking discoveries using these particular cells. Dr. Danielpour and I will kind of go back and forth and talk about some of these things, but we'll cover, kind of the discovery of Muse cells, their unique properties, how they compare to traditional stem cells and exosomes, and the latest scientific research that supports their superiority in the race for the superior skincare. And so why don't you bring up, first of all, we can talk about where Muse stem cells came from. First of all, what's a stem cell?
So, the stem cells are progenitor cells. They're cells that, for lack of a better word, they're the cells that create everything else in our body, from skin to hair to nails to everything else. And when we're in the embryonic phase, these stem cells are vibrant and young and really just making everything in our body. And as we age, the stem cells get older, they don't work as well, and we are constantly trying to grasp that youthful feeling with these youthful stem cells. Now, stem cells forever come from different areas in our bodies, right? And for years and years and years, we couldn't really come up with what's the best, because again, this research has been only going on for a finite amount of years. And most of the time, whether we got stem cells from fat, or we got it from blood, or we got it from bone marrow, they would work, but at times, if they were under a little bit of stress, they wouldn't work as much, or they would work for a very short amount of time. Now, Mary Dazawa did some research in Japan in which he found out that by taking the same cells and stressing them, they will actually be able to last longer and do more in our bodies. We got lucky enough to kind of stumble upon this in a sense.
Yeah. I mean, look, this Japanese research that came out in 2010, she discovered in 2007, was published in 2010, and they're unlike traditional mesenchymal stem cells, right? So the body, mesenchymal stem cells essentially make the structure and function of our body, whereas hematopoietic stem cells, which are the more immune-based red blood cells and white blood cells, those we'll talk about separately. But the reason why the Muse stem cells, which again are multi-lineage differentiating stress-enduring stem cells, they can survive harsh conditions, differentiate into multiple cell types without any genetic manipulation. Right? So they can be found naturally in bone marrow, peripheral blood, various connective tissues, even in the skin, and they can be isolated for therapeutic use, which albeit is not necessarily easy. These particular cells are put in these stress mediums or where they lack oxygen or they're temperature controlled or even through bioreactors, which can isolate some of these cells. The unique properties of these cells, and we'll get into why these are going to be amazing for skincare, right? So we'll talk about two different things. One is the Muse stem cells and one are Muse exosomes. Exosomes are the little microvesicles that come from these stem cells that carry a lot of the growth factors, and they happen to be, the baton that's carried from the stem cells to your cells. They exchange information, and so they're really an integral part of what we do. So if we talk about, stem cells being the Batman of regenerative medicine, then exosomes are definitely the Robin. The unique properties of Muse stem cells is the pluripotency. That means when we talk about pluripotent, that means that a cell, if you think about an embryo, the embryonic stem cells are pluripotent. They can form any cell or many different cell types in the body, right? But the problem with an embryonic cell that we would inject into the body is that because it can become any type of tissue, if it gets the wrong signal, it can be tumorigenic. That means that you can develop something called a teratoma, which is, a tumor that has hair, teeth, and nails growing somewhere that it shouldn't. So the interesting part is that these Muse stem cells, they are pluripotent without tumor risk. The second thing, they're highly resistant to oxidative stress. Now, what is that? Oxidative stress in the body essentially can put our cells, whether it's low oxygen tension or, if your body doesn't have the right nutrients, it puts certain cells in our body under what we call oxidative stress. These particular stem cells can endure these extreme stress conditions, making them more resilient than traditional mesenchymal stem cells. And that's been shown. That's been published in Nature Communications in 2018. So we know that these cells are already, as far as the ability to form other tissues and the fact that they can survive in stressful conditions, these are superior to regular stem cells. The last thing that the Muse stem cells contain, they have a special homing ability. They contain receptors that have sphingosine-1 phosphate receptors, and the sphingosine-1 phosphate is essentially released from damaged tissue. So imagine that if you inject these stem cells into the body, these Muse stem cells, they have a homing capability that can hone in on injured areas and repair tissue without invasive procedures. And this has already been shown. This is a Journal of Clinical Investigation in 2019. So if someone tells you that there are no superior stem cells, well, we have to ask, what are the potential risks? How do we know they're going where we want them to? And can they survive in areas like joints that lack oxygen? Can they stay for longer than the actual injection itself? Maybe we can talk about the Muse-derived exosomes versus traditional.
Sure. The cool thing is what you talked about is that homing capability. So, and it sounds really kind of magic and hocus pocus, but it's true that there's data behind this. So if you infuse Muse cells intravenously, something called the golden bag by Dazawa, and you put it in your veins, it has been shown that the stem cells have the intelligence, in a sense, or the capability to travel to the area that you have damaged. Now, when I say you have damage, let's just say, for example, you have a nagging shoulder that doesn't have a tear, but it has bad arthritis. A lot of people will say that they feel that their shoulder feels better, or they have other issues, like every time they walk more than 20 minutes, they're having significant back pain. These things have been shown to really, really help. I know it sounds like magic, but it's really, really kind of, but it's not. Moving along to Muse-derived exosomes, and exosomes are just the messenger signals, right? So the exosomes from Muse cells have been shown to contain higher levels of regenerative cytokines, microRNAs, and growth factors compared to those from the other MSCs or mesenchymal cells. And this came out in my Biomaterials 2021. And that is very important because that's what the exosomes have. That's what the whole point of the exosomes
Those are those growth factors that we're talking about.
The more they have, the more regenerative cytokines they have, the better. They're signaling molecules. And if you put them, for example, for hair growth, if you inject them directly into an area where you're having, your hair follicles are a little sleepier, they really do go and help wake up some of the damaged or sleepy hair follicles. Now, a recent study that was just done in stem cell translational medicine in 2022 suggested that Muse exosomes can enhance collagen synthesis, improve wound healing, and reduce inflammation more effectively than just regular mesenchymal cells. Now, that's incredible.
And that is something that is, will eventually be our segue into why we feel that this is going to be superior in skincare.
Absolutely.
Because the idea is, when we look at active ingredients in any skincare line, the whole goal is to preserve hydration, increase collagen synthesis, and essentially restore some of the cellular interactions and communications that we had when we were younger. And, in general, many skin products can't even penetrate to the level of skin where that's required. So that's why I feel like the regenerative skincare lines are slowly going to become more and more available because we see that the science works.
Agreed. And last but not least, 2023 research published in Advanced Drug Delivery Reviews highlights that the Muse exosomes can actually penetrate the skin, just like you said. And this is perfect because all the skincare that we're using, we're using some actives that work for a short amount of time. I mean, it's next level.
Right.
So
yeah, the interesting
part. We got to get this in some of our Beverly Hills MD products.
The interesting part is now many current scientific studies are working on drug delivery systems using exosomes because they can penetrate blood-brain barrier. They can penetrate into areas. And so what they do is they tag these exosomes. Instead of just having regenerative cytokines, they will actually put a drug delivery system within the exosomes and then infuse them. So we know this works because, again, the multi-trillion-dollar machine of a pharmaceutical industry is trying to find ways to use it to their advantage.
Absolutely.
Right? So when we talk about, the different types of data behind something. So the reason why this is going to be important in skincare. So let's look at some of the studies that are currently out. Study in Stem Cell Research and Therapy out of 2021 demonstrated Muse exosomes significantly increased type 1 and 3 collagen synthesis in dermal fibroblasts. That's in skin. And it promotes firmer and more youthful skin. If we look at accelerated wound healing, which is where all of skincare, truly the actives in skincare comes from, because we're, what do we try to do first when we come up with a drug? No one just goes for how do I look prettier, believe it or not. When the FDA evaluates something, they're looking, 1, is it safe? 2, is it effective? And 3, is it helpful? And so they look at wound healing first. It's one of the easiest things that we can do as scientists to initiate a study. This research published in Regenerative Medicine in 2022 found that wounds treated with Muse-derived exosomes healed 40% faster than those treated with traditional MSC exosomes. So this tells you right off the bat, in stressed environments, because if you look at non-healing ulcers and wounds, they have a low oxygen tension. They don't have a lot of blood supply that goes to the area. You can pour whatever you want on it, but if you don't have the right nutrients, the wound isn't going to heal. This is showing, even in that stressed environment, that wounds healed 40% faster. And then that oxidative stress that we talked about, a Free Radical Biology and Medicine 2023 study highlighted the Muse cells release exosomes that combat oxidative stress. And this is a major contributor to aging and skin damage. So if you look at, again, these combinations, superior tissue regeneration. When we look at International Journal of Molecular Sciences in 2023, it reported that Muse-derived exosomes enhance cellular turnover and regeneration in aged skin models. So now we've kind of gone over what stem cells are and exosomes are. We've gone over why Muse stem cells and exosomes seem to be superior. And until we start with genetic modifications and things like that, the safety profile in that, it can, again, we're not even to that level yet. So for what we have now, this seems to be the perfect delivery vehicle for actives into skincare. Now,
as long as they let us use them in the United States, which they're going to, because it's topical, because we're not actually injecting it into the body, where we can do that in Cabo at our clinic. But that's kind of like the only limiting factor that's holding us back.
Right. And you're already, for those of you who are very savvy and you're already in the know, you probably have been to a dermatologist or plastic surgeon's office where they've done microneedling facials using exosomes or some of these stem cells, right? It is topical. You will see an effect. But again, I'm trying to point out what is going to be the most effective. Now, regular stem cell and exosome facials will still have a benefit. And I feel that some of these can be far superior to what our current therapies are.
Right.
It still pales in comparison to the Muse stem cell and exosome treatments. So if we look at potential applications in skincare.
So first is going to be topical, like we talked about.
Yep.
Whether it's going to be used in skincare, where you're just putting it in and having something that's going to drive it into the skin, whether it's for hydration or wrinkle reduction or improved elasticity or whatever, improved collagen production. That's really going to be the main kind of reason for that.
I think the important thing to know here, again, this isn't because the preparation of these things, remember, it's still a biologic. So many are freeze-dried, lyophilized, where you have to mix it with a particular serum, then apply it to the face. Now, remember, if we think, how long do these products last? So imagine that if you have traditional regular exosomes in your cream, that it may not last more than 8 hours, right? So Muse stem cells and exosomes tend to last longer. We keep it refrigerated. And so let's say that's more of a 3-week to a 3 to 4 week cycle of using this on your skin every single day.
Right.
We know that it's going to do something.
Yes. The next method of delivery, as with what we've been doing already with exosomes, but is going to be injectable therapy. And injectable therapy is just basically taking the stem cells and injecting them into any areas that you want. But when we're talking cosmetics, it's actually microneedling them. So injecting them into the face or driving them in with microneedling into the face, into the arms, into the legs, anywhere on the body where you want a little bit more elasticity, a little bit more collagen production, tightness, wrinkle reduction, things like that, to really enhance fibroblast activity and tissue repair.
Definitely. And the other place where this is really going to play a role is post-laser or chemical peel recovery. Everyone who's ever had a fractionated CO2 laser or a 35% TCA peel, you know that you've got 7 days of downtime. Due to the anti-inflammatory and regenerative properties, Muse exosomes are being explored as post-procedure treatments to accelerate healing and reduce downtime. We've already seen it in our practice. It usually shaves at least a day and a half off of that therapy. And look, being out for a week can be pretty challenging, but we don't want to sacrifice the results. And so we're trying to find ways to shorten the true downtime.
And some people are even talking about injecting them into flaps, like facelift flaps,
Definitely.
Or to making, less inflammation, less bruising, faster healing, things like that. I think the sky's the limit when it comes to these cells. And once they become more readily available, once they become approved in the US, things like that, then I think you can use them for a variety of applications. When you compare these to what we've talked about in the past, just traditional stem cell therapies, how do they match up against them?
Yeah, I think I kind of alluded to it earlier. We have to look at, while they are effective, we have to look at their variable potency depending on the donor age, the cell source, and the very fact that, again, traditional mesenchymal stem cell exosomes may not last as long. They may not survive in particular temperatures, which is one of those things where we look at even exosomes that have been kept in liquid nitrogen or minus 80 degree freezer versus a lyophilized, which is a freeze dried where it makes it into powder form that you mix with a serum. This study that I'm referring to showed that there was an actual benefit to the lyophilized because it was a little more stress tolerant. It was able to survive in warmer temperatures. And so I think I would go with a lyophilized type of exosome. But if you look at iPSC-derived exosome, which are these induced pluripotent stem cell exosomes.
Big word there is induced.
Yes. The problem is, and again, this is when we look at another Japanese scientist named Yamanaka, and again, this has been around since 2016, where they took adult cells and they cultured them in a medium with 4 different what are called Yamanaka factors. And these particular transcription factors will revert that adult stem cell all the way back to its embryonic state. But remember what I talked about is that when you are totipotent, when you become an embryonic type of cell, it has the ability to carry tumorigenic capabilities, right? A teratoma, which is something that, you can grow hair, teeth, and nails somewhere. And obviously we want to avoid that.
Yep. And then compare those to the Muse-derived exosomes.
Yes.
Which are superior for regeneration. They're naturally occurring. They lack tumorigenic concerns, and they're safer, and they're more effective. So again, as of right now, the Muse stem cells and exosomes are really the creme de la creme. They're the best there is.
Right.
So the issue is that we have challenges, and these are the challenges that we're dealing with as regenerative medical doctors that are really interested in this stuff. And one of them is really scalability, right?
Right. Yeah, I think, again, we have to look at our donor. We are looking at large-scale production of Muse-derived exosomes. It can really be a challenge. I mean, each donor can supply a certain amount of stem cells, which in turn can supply a certain amount of exosomes. We can clonally expand these or replicate them to a certain point before we start losing its ability and its safety. So they become expensive. We have to look at our donors. Through advancements in bioreactor technology, it can be, although promising, again, this is still going to be one of the major roadblocks. The second, as you alluded to, was regulatory approval. And even with new administration, we know that these therapies show promise and that there's excitement that's being generated by the new administration. But they still have to go through safety, phase 1 safety trials to make sure that what we are doing isn't going to cause any untoward effect. And so I think many more clinical trials are needed to gain widespread FDA approval, even with a new administration, right? Because there are many moving parts, many variables. And so this part could be pretty challenging.
And last but not least is development of product,
right?
And all these things that we talk about and all these great ideas we have, there's a lot of money and research that has to get put behind it, but ongoing research will aim to optimize delivery methods such as nanoparticles, which we already use, and to enhance the stability and absorption of the Muse exosomes. Like, it's great to find the next best thing in the world. But what's hard sometimes is how the delivery system is going to work and if it's going to be effective.
Yeah, there's a whole new branch of medicine called nanobiotechnology, and they are finding ways of using, again, I talked about it earlier, exosomes to deliver drugs and to deliver medicines, and it's far more localized than taking a pill. You digest it in the body, and then it has its effect, but also has 10 different side effects. This is going to be much more targeted types of therapies, and what we're going to slowly start doing is we're going to deliver medicines through the skin. because it can cross that barrier. So I think that Muse stem cells and exosomes, stem cells and exosomes in skincare in general is very exciting. It represents the next frontier in regenerative skincare and medicine. The unique properties of the Muse portion set itself apart. So again, where can we find these things next? We'll keep you posted. I know that there are a few centers in the country and in the world right now that have Muse stem cells. We happen to be one of them.
Proactive Longevity in Cabo San Lucas.
That's right. And the topical things we have at our Beverly Hills plastic surgery group.
We can use the topical ones with the microneedling. And I think they're fantastic.
Yeah. So this is, again, I think we're going to find a whole new wave in regenerative skincare. We just got to make sure that you're not being duped by buying anything that has those tag words on it. And with upcoming podcasts, we'll go ahead and dispel myths and kind of filter through that for you. So stay tuned. Again, this was more of an introduction to the use of stem cells and exosomes in skincare. I do think that this is going to rapidly expand over the next few years, and stay tuned because we'll have more of those updates.
Absolutely. Listen, I'm super excited. I think that, we've been doing this for so long, but the Muse cells are the next generation in wow. And again, what we'll do is we'll check back with you in a month or two, because we're going to actually get this golden bag and we're going to do it ourselves, IV. And the things that I've heard from people that have done it is it's astonishing. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense how good people feel with an IV infusion of something, but we'll come back and tell you what we think.
If you like this video, you're going to love this one.
This is a risk that is modifiable via lifestyle. So you're better off finding out about it than just being blind, because you could have avoided the outcome if you knew ahead of time.